Go ahead, Kat.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, we are talking about understanding the threat landscape and the power of diverse perspective. If you are just tuning in, we are in the middle of the siberXchange conference. Today is the Women in Cybersecurity Day, and we are in a packed panel of experts to talk about this subject. So just to touch very quickly on diversity, we often talk about diversity from the perspective of inclusion. And ensuring that we have a diverse group of people for diverse opinions and perspective. But diversity is also really critical in cybersecurity for your approach. And we have different threats, and we have different ways to protect those threats. And because we have a diverse way that people might be coming at us, we also need a diverse way of looking at how to protect ourselves against those threats. Really simple example with working from home, a 60-year-old individual working from a home office is going to be vastly different than a 40-year-old individual who might have children that share their computer, might be different than a 20-year-old individual who's in an apartment with roommates that might be connecting IoT to their servers. So we're going to get into all of this kind of stuff. My name is Kat Coode. I'm a data privacy consultant. I run my own company called Binary Tattoo. I am going to allow our amazing panel to introduce themselves. So we're going to start with Marcia.
Happy to be here today. My name is Marcia Sequeira. I'm the country manager for Trend Micro Canada. Trend Micro is a global security vendor, has always been in security from day one. You may not be aware of the breadth of our technologies and platforms we cover, from endpoint, network, and security. Also the leader in the cloud security space and investing and growing in the IoT and OT spaces.
Fantastic, thank you. And Trend Micro is the amazing sponsor for this panel today, so that's amazing.
A pleasure.
Sherry from our West Coast, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Shirin Rumbolt, and I'm a information security officer for National Defense, and I'm actually managing one of the largest networks right now for National Defense. And I'm so happy to be joining you from Whistler, BC.
Lucky. Next, we have Alex. Alex, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me on the panel, especially on the Women in Cybersecurity Day. I guess I wore pink just for that reason. But, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Alexander Rao. I'm a partner with KPMG. I just recently joined, and I'm responsible for leading the cyber incident response practice. I came from IBM, Symantec, Mandiant to KPMG, and I have a vast background in cybersecurity, privacy, and incident response. And in incident response, you see a lot of cases, especially from a threat perspective, how not only Canadians, but global organizations are being impacted, and how the threat landscape is changing on a day-to-day basis, and how we can help our customers, but also our citizens here in Canada secure and keep them safe from cyber incidents.
Fantastic. And last but definitely not least, we've got Helen in the amazing studio. Helen?
Hi, everyone. My name is Helen Oakley, and I take on leadership role at SAP, global software provider. I'm also a co-founder at leading Cyber Ladies Toronto. It's a global professional network for women in cybersecurity. I also teach in cybersecurity and ethical hacking kits as part of organization hackstudent.com. So I'm not just passionate about cybersecurity, it's my lifestyle, and I'm so excited to be on this panel.
Amazing. All right, so we're going to start with probably the most important question. In your opinions and experience, what is the threat landscape looking like for Canadians and Canadian businesses? And we're going to start with Alex on this one.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's probably on everyone's top of mind. And we have talked about it so many times with the global pandemic, right? That definitely has increased the threat surface for not only Canadians, but on a global level, right? And you mentioned in the intro, Kat, with working from home, there's a special threat landscape and threat surface that has changed, that we're now having corporate devices that are on home networks together with our Alexa devices, with our Google devices, and potentially, as you said, people are sharing corporate devices because it's just available at home. So the threat surface and the ability for attackers to make use of it from a ransomware perspective has really increased, right? And we have seen phishing campaigns that are exploiting the vulnerabilities with regards to COVID vaccines and helping and so on and so forth. So from a personal and private perspective, the threat landscape has definitely increased. From a corporate perspective, on a national, what we see from an incident response perspective, when it comes to gaining intellectual capital from COVID vaccines. So we see national threat actors from Southeast Asia trying to gain intellectual capital and knowledge from our healthcare and chemical companies to see if they can get a leg up when it comes to releasing the COVID vaccine first. And I'm happy for everyone else to chime in here.
I completely agree, Alex. I think the threat landscape is always a reflection of the current events. And we see exactly that as cyber criminals were using COVID-19 as a lure, right? They reacted very quickly to take advantage of the pandemic. We saw a trend as well that there was a transition from low-level scams in Q2 to higher risk information stealing, especially on e-commerce. I don't know if anyone has seen that as well. We're being targeted just because of the increase of transactions online, right? Online commerce, giving just people were staying at home, the mobility restrictions. And we see that continue to rise, this kind of very social, more social engineering type of attacks and phishing.
Well, I can chime in too. And I think that retail, if we even think about retail in the private sector, I mean, online shopping has probably gone up dramatically. Everybody's been talking about that. Most folks are not actually getting into the physical spaces of retail and commercial business as much as they would normally. So, I mean, there's a bit of a threat there, and there's a little bit more opportunity, I think, for scams to happen, especially on legitimate websites and whatnot. Also for government, I guess when we think about the threat landscape, it's completely different now. We've sort of shifted to focusing a little bit more additional, sort of focus on insider threat. And because we're not physically seeing people as much in the office, we have to look at what those perspectives are looking like, and then making sure that we're educating and putting those awareness practices in place.
And to reflect on everything what's been just said, I also wanted to add that hackers are really looking at our behavior, right? We becoming our behavior outside of the office. We are having remote calls. We're working from home, maybe from our parents' home, from our friends' home or family, a lot of people around us. And by learning our habits, they also modifying the attacks, and they tailoring those attacks to make them more targeted to the audience and jeopardize companies' security.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because when we changed from office work to home work, it wasn't too long ago, it feels like forever, but back in March, beginning of April, we also not only changed our behaviors, we also changed the tool set and the applications that we're using. And you guys remember the Zoom bombing and Zoom security issues? So suddenly there was another threat vulnerability that could be exploited that nobody really was aware or cared much about, and Zoom was in the news right away, right? And they tried to patch and so on and so forth, and people got active about it. So that was a very interesting point that you brought up, that yes, the behavior and the tool set that we're using, right? The VPN, just recently, a leak from VPN usernames and passwords were leaked, because now suddenly virtual private networking is so important, because that's how corporate entities are trying to protect their data and the traffic between home and the office, right?
Yeah, Alex, that's a good point with Zoom, actually. Zoom's privacy issues were long known by advocates, probably months before it actually happened, right? But they'd been pressuring Zoom to make the fixes, and they hadn't done it. So I think one of the things people need to appreciate is not all tools are created equal, especially, which we'll get into, things like IoT from home. There's not all of them are regulated, and ultimately, a lot of these companies that are providing these tools, their bottom line was what they make from the tool, and putting in a lot of these privacy and security pieces costs them money. It doesn't make them money. So we as the companies and the individuals that are using these tools need to speak up that the privacy and security of the tools is critical. And the Zoom bombing, of course, became public and they fixed it. But again, that feature was there in Zoom a long time ago, and it's probably something that they should have fixed. So that's a great segue into this. Very much, we're working from home, and it is a new environment, and it is a very new way of working. So I'll start with Helen on this one. How has this shifted our threats going from in offices behind firewalls to our personal home offices?
Well, now all our devices, all our connection is open. So I see it as every person now as their own IT. They have to manage their own network, their own devices at home, even though devices are provided maybe by company to work from home on your laptop, on your phone. You still are in your network, and it's responsibility now. It's like companies almost outsourcing responsibility of IT on each individual employee, and that's a huge threat. And we can see also emerging threats across different areas. So it's not only IT. We have our doctors going online, right? So it's something that we are not ready completely. And how we're managing those threats and how we're managing those security aspects across people who never really been involved in that. I think it's a huge challenge.
No, I agree with you. I think there's a need to, for business just to heighten and guide employees to that associated risk that we've been talking about now that we all face from working from home, right? Because criminals absolutely are shifting and stealing corporate information from servers to data centers to homes. So there is a need, a heightened risk of, and IT security teams need to manage devices, data, employees. It is, it has certainly increased the stakes for everyone.
Yes, but I also see a huge opportunity here because you can make security awareness training now so much more relevant. So where before we had security awareness training in a corporate environment and everybody just clicked the next button to get through the training. Now we can bring that home and personal and family aspects to the training and make it really important to somebody and motivated to go through the training to not only secure their corporate devices, but also the home network, right? So it's a win-win situation. I think this is a huge opportunity for the security awareness training area when it comes to cybersecurity.
Well, and I think too, though, what like a lot of us are, sending a whole lot of people home to work, and we did that in March, and we didn't necessarily always have those. I know the private sector is a little bit more along teleworking and dealing with teleworking, and also having those practices in place for a lot of years, but a lot of the public sector did not. So quickly implementing a new, I guess, complete different either network or way of doing business for our users, employees, or whatnot could be, it was launched pretty quickly. So when we look at the threat landscape there, like we're also, was the public or private sector or anybody in those corporations taking a few shortcuts just to get everybody back to work kind of thing? Who's to say? And then also at the same time, the education piece is so important because we have such a diverse group of employees, as Kat alluded to, and also Helen, and that is that we've got people that have varying levels of experience and expertise in IT, and they don't necessarily have the IT and client service folks sitting in their living room helping them connect online. And often if we don't give the right tools to people to be able to do their jobs properly, they're going to look for something else that's going to substitute that may or may not be quite as secure as what we would hope. So again, lots of education pieces, lots of looking around technology and how we can implement practices. Everybody will find a workaround if you don't give them the right tools to do their job.
Yeah, I find too there's a lot of physical stuff people have discounted. So like Sherry, you said, you send people home like with the digital stuff, and Helen had even said too, like we become our own IT. So there's the digital side, some of which we can control by telling people which tools that they have to use. But physically, I think we discount a lot of stuff when you're behind, I mean, you're behind a technical firewall, but when you're within a building that someone else controls, there's only employees within that building, or there should be. There's security around the physical security of who can see your stuff. And there's been a lot of talk about healthcare going online and all of that. So, you know, if I was a healthcare professional and I had a patient's file lying out on my desk at home, that's now visible to anyone who lives in my house. Whereas previously in a medical office, that would have had a much better security process. So I find what businesses are missing from a security perspective as well is clean desk policies, and same with access. There are families that have to share a computer. And so if a family's sharing a computer and teenagers downloading an app on that computer, and that app isn't a good, safe app, then that app could get access to your corporate information. Or as I kind of alluded to at the beginning, IoT devices. If you have a secure network and you add in an IoT device, you've basically opened a gateway into your network. So if that IoT device is not secured, you're allowing anyone who wants to into their network. So are there any things and anyone has found with working from home where you've had to establish rules around laptop use and desk use and anything like that with corporate information?
Is it my turn?
Anyone who wants to chime in on that one?
You know, I wanted to bring this up earlier, but if you guys remember back to when we studied cybersecurity in the CIA triad, right? Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Availability is one that we never really think about when we're in the office because all the data, everything's available. And Sherry, you said we sent everybody home in March, and there's people, like I live up north in Barrie. I'm on a DSL line. There's people when the kids were sent home from school had no internet or they use satellite. So availability is also a key component. And that could also be exploited by attackers. If they just want to maybe attack a telecom distribution area and suddenly take availability out, that's cybersecurity as well. And I think that's a big component that we oftentimes forget, right? That was a different topic, but I wanted to come back and I keep it short to the devices at home. How many conversations are being recorded by our Alexas and by our Google devices unknowingly? And we know they do record it. They have use cases where they did it, and that's a confidentiality and privacy issue in my opinion as well, that corporations are not accounting for in right now.
That's not your opinion. That's a legal opinion. And I mean, especially in something medical, if you're under HIPAA and you say, "Oh, I'm HIPAA regular compliant," you're not compliant if the conversation's being recorded. So yeah, that is a legal issue.
And that's the whole thing around confidentiality. I just wanted to say something about that, because I mean, a lot of people are working from home with, you know, they may not have the luxury of having their own private office, and they also have children, wives, husbands, whatever, and everybody is actually working out of the house. And I've even, you know, heard of situations in which, you know, somebody's on one phone, somebody else is on another phone. I mean, you have to think about those conversations overlapping and who could be eavesdropping or hearing what other people are saying, right? And what we could think of as not necessarily that confidential in our aspect, but the aggregate of that could be sensitive or whatnot, or there is no need to know. So, you know, it's not just like unclassified public data, if you will.
I believe there was an insider trading case where a child or a teenager heard a dad talk about some company and the teenager related mess. Anyways, I read about it. It might not be fact checked, but that could be a possibility. Like, it's exactly what you just said.
Yeah, I actually had some colleagues that went and took calls from their cars for their privacy, right? So it absolutely, there is a heightened sensitivity. And companies, workers, right? We're all living this every single day. We were forced to address all kinds of issues, and I think that's going to be the new normal for a while.
Yeah,
you know.
So we've talked about a variety of threats. We've gone from insider threats, which can be both accidental, like we've just talked about, a lot of family members overhearing things, or it could be intentional, like Sherry kind of alluded to. If someone's not under your thumb, it's possible that they could be doing things they shouldn't be doing. And then we go all the way to Marcia, when you mentioned international threats as well, right? There's companies competing now
Absolutely.
Sadly, we're not in a everyone help each other mode. A lot of people are in the I want it first mode. So Marcia, I'm going to send this one to you. So we're talking about diversity. So where do you think that diverse perspective really helps in fighting the cybersecurity issues?
Thanks, Kat. Well, I think diversity is very important, both people and technical diversity. Solving problems requires diversity, gender, culture, age, experience to combat the bad guys in cybersecurity. People have different opinions, views, the way they interpret things, different ways to investigate and solve problems. A diverse team of threat researchers is a smarter, more creative, overall stronger team. Different type of researchers have different skill sets as well. Some are experts in number crunching or able to, go into the underground market, see some difficult images, still some bad stuff. So if I'm infiltrating a Brazilian underground market, as an example, you will need someone from that country, right, that speaks that language, that understands that culture. And we all know the threat landscape is ever evolving. So many new types of threats. You may have a person with mathematics background or be able to write the algorithms, or people who excel at STEM. It all depends who you are. Also, technology is very, very important part of the equation. Technology is constantly changing. There's always things to learn, right? Cloud is an example. And some people are better prepared than others. When it comes to technical diversity, it's also important to have a mix of people coming from, both the offensive and red teams, offensive security red teams and defensive security blue teams. System integrators, as an example, gives that ease of administration, automation. A SOC analyst will bring that actionability. Someone from R&D will bring the technical background. So I think having both technical and the people diversity in the teams from various backgrounds, right? As I mentioned, gender, opinion will help the company immensely to innovate and make faster and better decisions. And I'm very proud as well to say that our CEO and co-founder is a woman, Eva Chan, and Trend Micro will believe that women in diverse workforce are the future of cybersecurity. And we have many programs that like Close the Gap, that advocates and encourages more gender diversity talent into the industry, which I think we need very much.
I would like really to see more diversity in industry level, right? So common experts from different industry categories, from different professions, because in this new landscape, a lot of things getting digitalized. And like I mentioned, even example with doctors and patients, we never expected that really to happen, not that fast, right? So now, ready or not, it's here, and you just have to do it. So diversity from that perspective, someone coming from medical background or legal background or any other background, actually going to provide that knowledge, expertise, and that mindset how to solve these problems. Because right now, mindset is very separated. It's very isolated, I would put it this way, right? For example, medical people in medicine, if something happens to their device, they just allocate it to manufacturer, like, please fix this problem, right? I don't want to deal with this. But now it's changing, and everyone has to think more about how it affects their daily life, how it affects their business, how it affects their patients, customers, and so on. So I find that diversity, on top of everything else that we usually discuss, is very important in this new age, right? Not just new time.
No, completely agree. Very good point.
And I think too, there's so much psychology in cybersecurity and how the behavior. So, if you do behavior analytics on, any type of attack system or insight, and what the motivation is for whatever it is that somebody's trying to do. In lots of cases now, what we're seeing is not only the financial gain, but also, I would say, bragging rights to be able to get, ahead in one area or the other when we look at vaccines, for instance, for COVID-19. So there's a lot of psychology in place. And I think that, what Helen said too, was it's so important to actually bring the experts into that area, not only from an IT and security perspective for us to be hardening and locking down systems and making sure that those systems are protected, but we're also looking at how does that system behave? How does it function? We can't do that without the experts in the field today. And we can't do that with a diverse workforce of many different facets of humans to understand the behavior and the psychology around why something is happening the way it is. And I think that, the whole team effort and working together from many different perspectives is great. We can't go down the road anymore of how we used to do business 20 years ago. I mean, we have to sort of really shift the mindset and work towards more advanced technology, innovation to get things done, and also to look at the aspects of how important it is to be able to understand the behavior so that we can either mitigate. I don't know if we're ever going to stop the behavior, but we're going to mitigate, or we're going to actually look at different ways of actually, locking down those systems, hardening or minimizing that threat and risk to whatever it is that we're actually trying to protect.
Yeah, totally agree. And on that note, I think generational diversity is important as well. And by that, I mean what you just sort of were talking about. We're dealing with 20-year-old processes, especially in the corporate world. Like, I know we have the Facebooks and the Googles, which are very young companies, but in the corporate world, like if you look at financial and so on and so forth, it would help to bring a fresh set of mind, like from, I was thinking, millennials entering the workforce. Allow them to have a voice in the process, because not only will it change, hopefully, the behavior of some processes that's predictable and the attackers are trying to exploit. We talked about that behavior, but also maybe look at it from a way that us or me, gray-haired person, hasn't looked at it or isn't aware of, right? So yes, I totally agree from a gender diversity perspective, from a
age as well.
Age of a generation. And oftentimes, and I see it myself, like I started my career as young and I moved on. Nowadays, we don't give the young people enough of a voice, especially in areas, I believe, of cybersecurity, where they could bring a lot to the table. And yes, we always say you need to have experience, but they bring some experience to them. They were born in the age of the internet compared to us who didn't grow up with the internet. We were introduced to it. So it's just another way of looking at things. And I think that can be helpful from a fresh eye, fresh blood, and visionary perspective as what
Yeah, I love what you said, Alex. Sorry, with the ageism too, it's there's a generation, and it's not always by age. There's some very tech savvy octogenarians out there, but there's a lot of older people that don't know how to use the internet safely. And because we've taken their banking experience that they've stood by forever, where they like to stand in line and deal with a teller, and now we've said, no, you have to go online and do this. Are they doing that safely? And so for our perspective, we're like, oh, well, we'll look at this cyber attack. Couldn't possibly happen because nobody has a device without a password on it. But these people might, right? These people who have suddenly been forced into having to use tech when they possibly didn't use tech before is a great perspective on where some of the threats could be coming from. Just to get their opinions and find out how they use the tech, right? So how are people using the technology? How are people using the services? And then figuring out from there where it's coming from.
And that's perfect point.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I was just going to say it's a huge ramp up in education, as saying, for those that can't use it, right? That generation that takes you many times to explain how it works. And I see that with my own mother, which actually I'm very happy. She does online banking now, but and it's very secure, but it took a few tries, right, to get her to the point.
There definitely should be campaigns for people who are older age, and I completely agree. It's a big problem, and Kat, you mentioned it, right? So, like on government level, campaign to educate, like we had no smoking campaigns, right, for years. Now, there should be a cybersecurity campaign to educate people all ages so that it comes as more natural knowledge, more accessible knowledge, rather than just us experts trying to solve the problem of the whole world.
Yeah, very good points. And that just brings me back to our original discussion about the threat landscape. Suddenly, we're introducing processes in our day-to-day lives in different age groups to the public that were physical before, and now suddenly they become virtual. So if we were to get a letter in the mail now, oh, you can't renew your license sticker at the licensing office anymore, you do it by mail, will you take it for granted now, or do you send them the money by credit card? It goes actually somewhere else. So that's a big challenge for the introduction of new virtual services that weren't before. Are they legit or are they not?
And especially with online shopping, which a few people had mentioned. And again, if you're not familiar with online shopping and you don't know to look through a secure site and you don't know how to look for the HTTPS that most of us would be, obviously, I'm not going to give you my credit card if it's not secure. But a lot of people don't know that, especially if they've never had to do it before. So we want to protect individuals. We want to certainly protect companies. I'm going to start with you, Sherry, on this one about the kinds of policies and processes and maybe even tools that people should be looking at moving towards in order to protect their employees, their own assets, their own cyber assets, and then, of course, themselves and their families at home.
Well, and the first thing I want to start off with is like, I think every company organization need to understand what it is they're trying to protect. So again, too, there's a lot of like hype around, okay, let's have processes, policies, procedures, SOPs, standard operating procedures, all of these different things in place. Let's rule everybody to death, and put all of these like, really huge documents together and expect people to read everything, acceptable use policies and all these other things. But then, what is it that you're trying to protect? So look at your proprietary data, look at that information and say, this is the important thing that I want to protect, and then work from there. So, I always say, like, work smarter, not harder. So put the absolute things in place that you need to put in place, especially right now where we have such a different way of doing our work, especially with all of the remote workers and everything. So policies that we normally have in the office, clean desk policy, as you mentioned, and all these other things, we don't necessarily have. We have to amend these things, and we have to look at that. So I would say key policies, of course, there's always a high overarching policies for security. Make sure you have that in place to protect whatever it is that you're trying to protect. But then look at your process, procedures, and everything. And these things have to be on the fly. So you can't create them and then 10 years later update them. I mean, policy, always look at that from the long-term perspective and have something in place, so it sort of understands what it is that you're trying to achieve. But then processes and all these other things, try to move in an agile approach to keep these things up to date and for security and also for privacy, and make sure that you're educating that out. But then we also have that whole education, I would say, overdrive, where we're actually giving people too much information, employees too much information, and then everybody is just being overwhelmed with all of this educational advice, especially during a time when we're doing a lot of remote work. So try to keep things succinct, simple, to the point, succinct. Keep, all of your absolute most important things. Make sure you educate those out. A lot of, we have some people that don't necessarily also have, all of the necessary IT equipment at home. When you're onboarding and getting people in a remote workforce very, very quickly, some organizations may not have had everybody with, issued a laptop and a phone and all these other things to be able to get to work, right? So then we're looking at, other cloud hosted solutions and whatnot. So what's the security and what's the processes around those? And then I guess when you say tools, I mean, hopefully everybody's got some form of monitoring so that they're actually monitoring employee usage and also what's kind of happening and getting a feel for what's going on. So, I mean, one thing that I always say is like, hopefully managers, supervisors, organizations know their employees and are, looking at that from that perspective, because the more succinct you're educating, the more succinct you're giving that data to that work for you, it's going to be much easier for them to report something if it's anomalous or if something is looking a little bit unusual. But hopefully you've got your back-end monitoring tools in place, all of the normal things, intrusion prevention, detection, antivirus, blah, blah, and then move ahead with educating and keeping your employees on track, and then also looking for anything that's unusual. So in a nutshell, have your overarching pieces to protect whatever it is that you're trying to protect. As far as your processes and all these other things, move this on the fly. Change as you can, but let's not overwhelm everybody with data. So keep it succinct. Say, new changes to the standard has come out. Here's para. The changes are para A blah. This is what's changed. Don't send everybody the entire document again. Just make sure that you just give the change pieces and say, follow up on that. Your acceptable use policies are probably going to change. And how you do business is going to change. So I'll let everybody else have an opportunity now.
Yeah.
And that's
I would
excellent.
say as well.
Go ahead, Marcia. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, going to add the siloed security tools and a single layer of protection is just not enough, and it's very important for business. Just should look at a multi-layer solution that can provide that mix of threat defense capabilities, right? So like you mentioned, detection, investigation, and response, but across multiple platforms, including email, endpoint, servers, networks, and cloud workloads. It's just something I wanted to add, and it's very, very important to have that visibility, cross-layer visibility.
From the company perspective, I completely agree. So it's excellent point, Shirin. Thank you, and Marcia, for mentioning about policies. And policies, especially when landscape shifting so drastically, it's very important to keep them up to date, keep them in sync, keep them simple, right? But I think the change at the company level will happen at further extent, right? So we look, for example, at technology companies. I see how CIOs and CISOs will work more closely together to define their infrastructure and really identify the platform that will cover all these aspects, the monitoring, the access, encryption, and everything, right? And including the remote work. It's almost like we want to ship like IT out of the box to each employee as they getting hired, as they shifting from role to role. From individual perspective, the tools that we should use, I would say, we are not going away from passwordless systems anytime soon right now, right? So maybe it's our goal, but not yet. And I've been recommending for a while, get the password manager right now as never before you need it, because so many accounts I cannot keep track, right? And we just keep creating. And people who even not so active in social, getting on all these different accounts, it's impossible. So password manager, I think it's a must right now until there is something better is going to be implemented, right? And simply at least stick to that and use it.
You're not using the same password for all of your accounts? I'm kidding.
Well, I know, Alex, you showed your sticky note, right? And Kat removed that paper from her back office.
No, great advice. I agree with everything you're saying. And just wanted to add, we don't know when we're going back into the office. I know we're in phase 3 here in Ontario and people are starting to slowly go back. But I also know that companies like Google and the large organizations have said they're not expecting the employees to go back till the end of 2021, and who knows. So I think from a corporate perspective, we really have to change our thinking of our employees as just a corporate citizen. We need to involve them also from a private citizen perspective and involve put a security envelope on both of these identities. I think that's the only way that we can keep the organization secure, if we secure it from a corporate perspective, but also help our employees to secure them from a private and personal perspective. And I agree that we're over-educated and things like that, but coming back to my earlier comment that there's an opportunity to make security awareness training more relevant, right? And I also feel that the government can take a part in that. When it comes to the elderly people who are now doing more virtual, right? There could be a more education that the corporate world and the government could do together to help not only bolster corporate security, but also private security. And I think both will be a win-win situation to protect the organization and private citizens overall.
And the Center for Cybersecurity does some really great stuff on Get Cyber Safe and things like that. So, which was the old public safety, if you will. So there is some really, really good sites out there. But again, too, not everybody knows where to go and also to have those sites. So it's really important, I think, for my mom that had the same password forever. And I'm like, Mommy, you can't use that for your 3 Facebook pages and everything else. So, I keep having to say that. And again, how do we educate other generations and even younger generations? But it's always about, selling what's in it for them, right? So important to make sure that we actually succinctly, I think when people have a stake in the game, they react and they act differently, and Kat could probably, agree with that. And it's really about how to get people to understand what their responsibility is in keeping not only themselves safe, but also the organization that they probably
and talking about people at corporate level, I think we're also going to see a shift in our roles and positions. So if right now we very used to a cybersecurity expert or analyst or anything, that will shift, that will spread across different roles, and we may see something that today maybe not seem as cybersecurity role, but they will be doing cybersecurity tasks, because in reality, everyone will be responsible for safety and security of the systems, of the company, of the personal life, and so on. So we'll see, like, as we're shifting to cloud, maybe we don't need so much of vulnerability management, like patch management and so on, because company is not going to handle that. But we need that configuration management, right? People who will be knowledgeable and make sure that systems are configured properly and so on. So I see that shift is also coming, and companies will be addressing that as well.
Yeah, I think right now, I think we all agree we all need to rethink security, right? In this new era of not only working from home, but as we were saying, from all different aspects. It's
interesting times.
It is indeed. The scale of breadth and change that this pandemic has imposed in every one of us, and how we work. And
when you talk about scale, it's not only impacting Ontario, Toronto. It's a global.
The global is everyone.
Everyone is impacted.
Exactly.
And that's. It's kind of comforting to know that everybody's in the same boat, but it's also daunting, right? Because how are we dealing with all the challenges that are?
And I think that's even more important now, to have those partners, right? To rely on those partners, to work with our partners, to with government and all kinds of experts that because we need everyone, I think, more than ever now.
So what I'm hearing a lot, especially with the companies, it all comes down to people. I mean, we've all heard the statistics. It's like 80% of all cybersecurity incidents are a person, right? And there was a massive Twitter hack recently that was social engineering via some human being at the company. And certainly at the beginning of the pandemic, phishing attacks went up 700%. So I mean, the hackers know what they're doing. They're going after people. I will say, because I like analogies. If you know me, I like analogies. But we're all going forward with our little medieval village. And it used to be that the knights, who were the IT department, were responsible for cybersecurity. So they were well armored. They knew how to fight. They went out. They battled cybersecurity. We were fine. But now we are bringing the children and all of the bakers, and everyone has to come fight the cybersecurity war. And so there's the technology or the tools, which is let's give them all armor and a spear. And then there's the processes, which is let's teach them how to fight. And as Alex has said, like we've trying with this new education. Education is great, but then Sherry said it's overwhelming. You don't have enough time to teach the 10-year-old boy how to use the spear properly. So the best thing we can do right now sometimes is tooling. And I think Helen mentioned that too, is finding the right tools. And Marcia as well is looking into vendors and partners. But how can we get armor onto every little member of our town to protect them, and then ultimately protect what we are trying to protect, whatever our crown jewels are in our companies and individually at home. But yeah, trying to educate everyone is the ideal. But people are overwhelmed. They're dealing with personal issues. They're dealing with their families at home. And so ensuring that they've read that policy, signed off on it, and they're going to.
Exactly. And not only that, like we all know, in cybersecurity or security, there's just the shortage of skills gap, right? Even trying to find the right person or to find a person with those skills, it's very hard. So there's so many layers of, of stress, if you may, on top of everybody working from home as well. So, yeah.
Well, I think now more than ever, everybody needs to pull together and start working together a lot more. And there has to be collaboration. There has to be good communication. It's not necessarily about proprietary knowledge or data anymore and all these other things and somebody getting ahead. It's more about let's work together to make sure
you have to share.
Keeping humans safe. I mean, we all just learned a very valuable lesson about the human spirit in the last few months, and that is that we're in the middle of a world pandemic, and what we want to do is make sure that everybody is safe and healthy, and they're here on this planet, and we're all doing the right thing. So I think that it's really important that we all pull together and work together and do what's right, and give everybody an opportunity as well to be able to share that knowledge and share that data and information. And again, we have to learn differently and how we would do things. And I mean, we all love rules, and everybody talks about rules, especially if you're parenting and all that stuff. But I mean, in the long run, we have to, not only within our own families, but also within our companies and within, I guess, globally.
Yeah, you described it with a very Canadian characteristic. We have to pull together, right? And I think I think even Trudeau has said it. As Canadians, we will come out of this stronger, but it will take a while, right? So, but one last note on this family and so on and so forth. For children, my advice would be to reduce their digital footprint as much as possible. Like, don't have them an account on every social media platform as possible that there could be, and don't give them full-fledged laptops or TVs, computers. But yeah, I leave it at that.
Well, and I mean, we all hear about that too, where it's like, I mean, all the kids are home and not in school and things like that, and they're learning from home, and parents are like, I still have to work. I still have to do my job for 8 hours a day or more in some cases. Sometimes people are working 10, 12 hours a day. So then, how do you keep your children engaged, entertained, at the same time as doing your job and just managing everything? It's a lot.
It is a lot.
And I think that that's where sometimes we run into risk, because sometimes just like, okay, go play that game for another 15, 20 minutes so I can get this meeting finished. So how do we actually manage everything? So it's a huge kind of conundrum for some people right now.
I think globally we have seen the proof that government can pull everyone together on a topic very well, like the regulations that have been changing, or the phases of COVID, that how we restrictions and so on that's been rolled out. I think government has the power to do it, and in order to get everyone on the same page with cybersecurity, tools will not solve everything. There's still going to be new attacks. There's still going to be new threats that coming in. So we need to launch at the government level campaigns, right, to educate. We need to include that education at early age in our schools and our universities everywhere. Whoever didn't receive that education, they should have an opportunity to get that at a very accessible level, right? And be aware of what's coming, Double check your information sources. There's so much scam right now. It's unbelievable. And every day, so many people are being affected by that. So I think there is no other way. We won't be able to solve it all with tools. We have to get government on the same page and launch those campaigns and include that education at early age.
And I think a lot of it too is we've come to rely and trust on tools to just be there for us, right? We've I always use this example with my daughter's friend tried to speak to her iPad with Siri, and my daughter said, well, we don't have Siri turned on. And she's like, what do you have to do, type? So, we've become used to these conveniences where it's like, well, this is a really cool feature. Why wouldn't I use it? Smart TVs are cool if you don't want to stand up, but when you look at it from the privacy perspective and the sheer quantity of data it's collecting about you if it has a microphone on, how do we educate people about how they're using these tools? And I know even with kids, there's a lot of digital citizenship training, right? There's a lot of like be nice on your device kind of thing, which is also very good and useful. But there isn't as much, here's who's taking your data. Here's how to look through terms and conditions to understand what these tools are. And now as adults, it's like people use Facebook and then they were panicking over contact tracing. And I'm like, you are giving away infinitely more information in Facebook than you ever will with this contact tracing. But yes, there's some weird dichotomy here where people trust some things and then not others. But yeah, understanding, I think the education around just understanding every time you go online, here's what you're giving away and here's where it's going, would help people, I think, monitor and rein in how they're using tools. And again, because that is such a vector for threats, that is such a way that people are getting into people's homes. We're gonna try and leave some time for questions. So I want to go around one more time really quickly and see, to close off, is one tip, whether it's for individuals or as a business? I'll start with Marcia. What's one tip for people to protect themselves?
So I'm going to, for business, I would say, and people business, really just can't rely on known bad only. So again, for business, a cross-layer visibility, collecting and analyzing data, it's very, very important. Will give you greater visibility, greater understanding, more accurate incident response.
Fantastic. Helen, how about you?
Yes, I will focus on people because I think people are the most important thing here. Companies can figure out their tools. Aside of password manager and checking your scam, I want to mention the home network, right? So a lot of us setting up our home network, our Wi-Fi and so on, really secure that. And also create a separate network segmentation, right, for your IoT devices, guest network, right? Your guests are coming in, your family members are coming in, they're joining your Wi-Fi. Now, this Wi-Fi is in their phones, in their devices, the credential to log into that Wi-Fi. So really think about that. Like I mentioned, you are now IT. And from company's perspective, we need to bring education home, right? How to manage your security at home. Like IT in a box, Office in a box, right? Just all the information that you need to know and guide how to do that, and actually also provide some help center if somebody have questions.
Fantastic. Sherry, how about you?
I think from a corporate perspective, I would say be succinct in your communications to your employees, especially with remote work right now. I think that's going to go a long way to minimizing any threat. Be succinct, be absolutely honest, explain what your concerns are, give them little good detail, but not a huge amount of detail. It's so important right now because we're sending so many emails and we're like directing so much like different type of process changes or whatever. So let's be succinct. Let's be very, very clear in what we're trying to do. Let's try to be smarter in how we actually do our business through an innovation, and also, technologies is also changing on the fly. So I think we all have to understand from all of our generations, diversity aspects and everything, that we're all in this in a way that's going to, we want to get to the bottom line. We want to protect what we need to protect, but we also want to do it in a way that's meaningful to everybody and that we're not inundating everybody with too much.
And Alex?
Everything well said, but I wanted to add that for corporations, don't try to do it on your own. Bring in the subject matter experts. I know it's a very difficult and economic environment, but don't save on the wrong end because it won't pay off in the long term. So partner with cybersecurity experts, have cybersecurity experts on standby, or help from a consultative perspective, help them to address some of the issues. And from a personal perspective, the same. Like don't try to figure things out. There's so many tools and advice out there that can help you protect yourself and make you more secure at home, to reach out to those resources and use those resources. So yeah, make use of what's out there and have people on standby that can help you in the event that you need them.
That's fantastic. And I'll just throw in, if you haven't done so as a company already, now is the time to redo your threat risk assessments and sit down and certainly bigger companies, like Alex has said, if you can afford to bring in a consultant, now is the time, because it will save you money and time in the long run. If you are a small medium enterprise and you don't have that money, in the spirit of diversity, if you can funnel that question out to your staff and say, we are trying to, redo our tools and processes, what are some of the risks you see from your perspective? Now you've tied in that everyone's kind of opinion. You might be surprised at some of the ideas and risks that other people see that you may not have thought of. So I don't know, Ali, do we have time? We have a few minutes if there's any questions out there for our panel.
Hey, assuming you can hear me fine, there are 2 questions and we have 5 minutes. I'll read it verbatim to you. The first question is, with shifting and shrinking budgets, where would you ask IT to focus their security priorities in the immediate?
My opinion would be on visibility and monitoring, and behavioral analysis, because the environment has changed so much. And if we don't know what's going on, if we can't see it. So that's where I would put my efforts and money. Visibility and monitoring my crown jewels from a corporate perspective.
And to add to that, I don't think at this point, because everything is shifted, we can really provide ROI on our investment at this point. We don't know how it's going to turn out at this point. We can use system, we can use our best estimate, but I completely agree with Alex as well that monitoring is going to be one of highest priority investment.
I'd like to add maybe some education, user awareness might be very important. Especially in the changing landscape and how we do business outside of the normal workplace.
Kat, I'll jump on to the second question then, and that is the question on free tools. Various corporations are offering free tools for usage. How do end users, especially end users in the home, assess what are the right tools to be using and what are not?
How about ask your security experts?
So this is a good point. I would have answered to say, check your resources. Don't take every free tool for granted. You need to check where it's coming from, right? I believe there's some telecommunication company in Canada that offers free antivirus software, right? So that I would trust. But if it's on a website that you haven't checked before that says, oh, here's a free security tool, I wouldn't necessarily download that and install it. So check your sources, your resources, where it comes from. So it's coming from a trusted source. Only then I would trust a free tool.
Yeah, we provide at Trend Micro several free assessment security tools. So I ask, if you're interested, go to our website, and we provide all kinds of free information, free assessment tools, security-wise, and for kids, for adults, for enterprise. So take a look.
From a company perspective, if you're asking from a small, medium company or even larger, I would definitely, aside of checking your source to make sure the tool is secure and no malware is attached to that, I would also check license, right? Because open source might be okay to use in some cases and might not very okay or at some extent okay to use for certain businesses. So definitely check licenses so that it's not only secure, but also you can use it.
And cost, unfortunately, cost isn't always an indicator, because if you look at something like Signal, which is an encrypted browser, it's free. And then there's others that you pay for that aren't maybe as high in security or privacy.
But, you also got to look at your information too. So, if you're looking at it from a business perspective, is your organization going to be okay with you using whatever tools that are out there? So, you need to kind of check too and make sure that everybody's okay with that, because what are you actually putting in those tools, or what are you sharing in those tools? Yeah. So such an important thing, especially when it comes around sensitive information and data and all that stuff.
Yeah. It's very different from home to corporate, right? One thing is download something from home, but you still have to be careful. But yes, absolutely. You don't want to violate your corporate, terms and conditions, right? By downloading free things that you're not supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Kat, that brings us to the last 30-odd seconds, so I'll turn it over to you for closing comments. Thank you, Kat.
Thank you. It has been such a massive privilege to be on video on stage with all of these amazing panelists. So thank you to all of you for your insight. And as someone had said, we're all enduring the same storm, but I've also seen, same storm, different boat. So I think one thing to keep in mind here is there is no right answer. So you do the best with what you can, with the budget you have and the priorities you have. But it is chaotic and unknown, and there is no right answer. So everyone's just trying to weather the storm. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope that this has been helpful. And thank you again to CyberX for hosting this panel.
Thanks,
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Have a great day.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.